Welcome to Spirit in the Material World. I'm your host, Janna Zinzi. You can also call me Jazz. I'm so happy to have an amazing young woman with me here today. We're going to welcome Nyasha Franklin. And let me tell you about how dope she is. She is a slow and heritage traveler leading a travel and education company called World to the Whyze, which I love. That specializes in helping students and curious souls connect with the African diaspora around the globe. She creates traveling curriculums that help the African diaspora explorer in all of us to get to know Black histories and the present. She started this journey in Colombia, where she is with us now, and hopes to explore the rest of the world with students in the coming years. And her organization has been thrust into the world of experience development, working hand in hand with Black cultural workers in Colombia to fine-tune and market their offerings for the growing Afro Tourism market in Cali, Colombia. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Did I leave anything out?
No, you got it perfect. I'm glad I updated my LinkedIn profile a couple months ago.
And there's so much more to you than your bio, but it's just a taste of like how awesome you are and some of the really cool things that you're doing. We connected through Travel Unity, I believe, and we have a lot of folks in common. But I was just really interested in your story, and I'd love if you could share how you ended up in Cali, and what keeps you staying there.
Perfect. Thank you again also, Jazz, for having me on your platform. I'm really grateful and really honored to be sharing space with you and sharing my story with you. It's really lovely when other people want to hear your story too. So I really appreciate you making the connection, the reaching out to see how we could collaborate in this way. So I'm from New York. I'm from Harlem, New York. I am not Colombian. People here seem to think I'm Colombian, but I'm not Colombian. Mm-hmm. And I think for a lot of Colombians, it's kind of odd to see people in certain places if they're not Colombian, which I think is really interesting. And I tend to have an interest in places that have a lot of Black people and have a really, really rich music culture. That's something that I'm really interested in right now in my life, is learning instruments and singing. That's been like an interest that I've had throughout my kind of growing up years, but it's something that right now I feel really good when I'm in contact with strong music culture, especially the ones that have drums and things like that. So I came to Cali for the first time in 2022. I did not come by accident. Seems like everything was, set up for me to get here. I knew I always wanted to come to Colombia, but I didn't know how or when. So the first time I really met other Colombians that looked like me or were darker was in 2018. I was studying abroad in Cuba. And I went to this poetry event, and the invited international guests were Colombian people from Cali, all Black women of differing shades. And the women all, I wish I had the instrument with me. They all had this instrument. I don't have one around here. They all had this instrument called a guasa. That's like a percussive maraca type of instrument, but it's not shaped round like a maraca. It's like it looks like a rain stick. And that's like a lady's instrument. It's a singer's instrument. So they sang these really beautiful songs, and they had these really interesting instruments that they carried around, and they always carried them around because these were singers. And they talked to us about the situation that was happening at the time with Black people on the Pacific coast. And I think as a student of the African diaspora in Latin America, you always hear about the Atlantic coast of Colombia. You always hear about the Atlantic, the Caribbean, the Black Atlantic, like in the African diaspora studies type of world. People always talk about the Black Atlantic, and people don't really talk about the Black Pacific as much. So I didn't even know they had a Pacific coast. I didn't know there were, people don't like it when I say that in professional space. Like, I didn't know they had Black people on the Pacific, but I had no clue. And then these ladies were like telling us about the political situation that was going on, about how a lot of people were just being displaced from their hometowns. Like, they were just talking a lot about the political strife that Black people were going through, and I had no clue about it. So when I went back home, I decided to look it up a little bit, and then I saw this article from Travel Noir it was like 5 Black international festivals you have to go to at least once in your life, and one of the festivals was in Cali, Colombia. So I was like, damn, like, oh wow, it's second thing I'm seeing in 6 months about Cali Colombia. So I look up the festival. It always happens in August. The date always seems to move around, but I understand now that the date moves around because it's attached to like one of those Monday holidays, one of those 3-day weekends. So now it's easy to understand it, but before I was like, okay, I know it's in August. I have no clue which date, but I know one day I'm supposed to get there. And funny enough, I had this little boyfriend when I was in Cuba. And I was like, oh, I can't stay with you because I need to go other places. I need to see other places. Not to date other people per se, but I can't always be coming here. I have to go other places too. And I was a kid. I was broke. So I was like, if I'm going to spend money going somewhere, I can't always come here. I knew for a long time. And I didn't get here until like I don't know how many years that was. Like 4, 5, 6 years later. So I had gotten this natural building bug, and I had seen these buildings on YouTube that were built out of mud, essentially, but more, if you think about it in a more complex manner, it's like built with earth, with wet, compounded earth, straw, sand, sometimes with cement. There's all these different building styles that you can do with natural products. So I got really into that, and I took a bunch of courses. And then I saw this month-long course in Colombia. And I was like, well, I was working a remote job at the time. I said, I can save. I don't like the job, so this is the perfect opportunity to leave. And I wasn't accustomed to working office jobs, so it was really hard for me to work an office job. I was a teacher for like 2 years. So it was just, I didn't like working in the office. So I was like, this is my perfect exit. I have something to do. I'm not just quitting just because I want to. I'm not just quitting because I found something else. Like, I'm quitting because there's something exciting that I want to do. So I quit. I was 24. I came to Santa Marta first. So Santa Marta is on the Caribbean side of the country. I was in a town called Bonda. It's like right outside of Santa Marta. And it was the neighborhood, right? It's like on a mountain. The neighborhood I was in is called Paso de Mango. And it was this indigenous lady with a man from Switzerland, I think, that they had created a home together. And they built one natural house, but it didn't age well. It's like they built it from a book, but they didn't have any help. So we lived with them for a month in tents, trying to build them another house, essentially.
Wow.
And in the process, all of us would be learning how to build these kind of houses, essentially. So it's kind of like a work exchange, and we paid so that we can get food and we could contribute to the bills that they had because we were living in their space for so long. And at the end of that month, it was right on time for the Petronio. So I come to Cali late in middle August for the Petronio Alvarez Festival, which is it's a traditional music festival. Let me see, what's the long title? Festival de Música del Pacífico Sur Petronio Alvarez, which translates to the traditional Southern Pacific music, but now it's like generally Pacific music, and it's named after a man called Petronio Alvarez from Buenaventura. And it's the largest black cultural festival in Latin America. And it's not very known. I'm not sure why it's not known, but a lot of people don't seem to have heard about it. So I came, there's a huge black American community that they like live in Medellin, or they live in Santa Marta, or they live in some other city, and they come down for Petronio because like anybody who can comes, essentially. And I started meeting all these people, and I was like, Cali seems really nice. So I stayed for 1 month, and then I wanted to go to Brazil, and it was too expensive. So I was like, I'm just going to stay. And I stayed. I traveled around the country. And I think what got me here was knowing that there was some kind of music that I wanted to learn more about. And I wanted to learn how to play the marimba. I'm actually in right now a cultural center called Chonta E, also known as the Chonta House. And the teacher that teaches here is my music teacher. And he taught me marimba for like 3 months. And I realized like my rhythm, it's a different rhythm. It's like water people's rhythm. So it's on a 3/4. It's kind of like similar to music in Cuba, the traditional music in Cuba that's on a 3/4, 6/8 pattern. Yes. If you're not accustomed to those wavy musics, it's very hard. I'm a 4/4 kind of girl because I think most music of the black diaspora is on a 4/4 kind of, consistent pattern. So I took marimba classes and everything, and I didn't realize that I really liked the music for singing until later. It's like I took this one trip and I was like, oh, I'm having a blast singing here. So I actually like the singing culture more than like the instruments. And
Wow.
I
Have you
keep
always
learning.
I'm sorry, were you
Say
always a
again?
singer?
Yes. I just think I didn't
Okay.
think about it that much. I'm also a dancer, but my knees are really bad right now. Like I'm aging quickly, and my knees are not keeping up with. They're aging much faster than I am. So, I think it's funny because I feel like I feel like my body knew that I was not gonna be able to dance as much or something when I went to the coast for the first time to go to one of these events that I guess we'll talk about later, these Catholic events. And the music is so rich that I didn't dance. I like my first 4 months here, I danced like 3 times a week, salsa classes. Like my knees were really good at the time. I was dancing all the time. And then I went to this trip on the coast. I sang my heart out for 2 weeks. It was amazing. And you sing in community. You don't sing alone. Like you sing in like the chorus is everybody. It's like there's no
Right.
performer over here, público, what is that, audience over here. It's like we're all in
Mhm.
it. We're all singing. We're all participating. And I feel like my body took me somewhere where I could find another art form that I can still participate in without having to rely on my knees as much, and that sustains me in a different way, which is really lovely. So
That's
I'm
beautiful.
grateful to that, whatever sent me that way, so that I could experience that and remember that there are other art forms that feel like they give me a reset, like a breath of fresh air of my spirit, you know. But yes, I've always been a singing person, but I had leaned more into dance for like my last, like for high school and college. But I sang all throughout high school in a chorus, like traditional choir, and folk singing groups because I like folk music, different folk music from different places. But yes,
That's amazing. So you ended up at the festival, and then is that what just you were like, I'm sold, I need to stay, I'm done, I'm good here?
I think the festival wasn't it because I'm actually not a festival gal. But it was the people that I met. It was like on that weekend, I met everybody I needed to meet, essentially. So the people that I visited when I went to the southern Pacific coast for the first time, I met them. It was like the first 3 days I got here. Basically, I got here on the 11th, and it was from the 11th to the 15th or something like that. So it was like those 3 4 days I met all these people that I needed to meet. So I met the person that I work with now as a logistics coordinator. I met her by accident that day. I met the people she introduced me to the people that I go and visit now at least once or twice a year on the coast. I met them that weekend. I met people that introduced me to, for example, the guy who owns the place that I'm in right now that taught me my music class. I just I met so many people because it's a great time for people to come together. So even if you don't like the festival, there's always events happening all around the city. And I think the people and the culture is what keeps me coming back. Like I think that I don't want to talk bad about the other cities,
Uh-oh.
but the other
Uh-huh.
cities, the other big cities, right? Because the other big cities are Medellin and Bogota. Bogota is the capital. It's very white. It's colder than it is here. Medellin is not cold, but it has a cooler climate. It has more of a
Okay.
summer climate, and this is like very like hot, sometimes a little tropical. It depends on the season. And I feel like the what people say here is calor humano, like the feeling of the warmness of the people, the friendliness of the people. There's more black people over here in this city because of migration and because it's so close to the Pacific coast. So the food is really good. The people have this kind of, they have a custom of like, it feels like people have migrated so recently here that they're not as city cold as other city people, you know?
I understand.
So they have this feel like, I feel like people interact with you as if you're in a small town, even though it's like a small mid-sized city, but
Yeah.
the humanity that you feel is very lovely, and I think the food is not the same, right? I have Jamaican heritage, so it's like I don't have the same exact food that I'm accustomed to, but I think that the palate is similar enough that I can enjoy myself with the food, with the music, with the people, and and having access to the coast so close is something that I really love about Cali. Like I think, unfortunately Cali, hopefully the people from the Secretary of Tourism don't hear me saying this. The people, the city of Cali, the city of Cali is doing its best to claim something doesn't belong to them, which is the Pacific region. So the city of Cali, it's kind of like let me see if I can give an example from New York. It's kind of like if I don't know how to say this. It's kind of like if Miami was the thing that brought everybody to Florida, and there was a city right outside of Miami that has more money, more infrastructure, and they tried to say, we own Miami. Miami belongs to us.
Mm-hmm.
And the people in Miami are like, wait a second. All this time you said we were somebody far away, that we were ghetto, that we were this, that we were that, and now you want to claim Miami. You know what I mean? And that's happening here. Like when you come in I'm not saying lies, so they can't say anything to me about that. When you come to the airport in Cali, there's this huge, like, it's kind of like an advertisement, but it's like a big banner that's like, welcome to Cali. They have people with head wraps on, and it's like they have this very African sensibility to what they impose onto the black people here. So people wear head wraps and stuff, but I think the way that it's being read is different than it doesn't feel as normal. It feels very like decorative in an interesting way. So they have people with head wraps, they have a marimba, they have, it's like, oh, look, Cali is so exciting, so lovely. And at the bottom it says, Cali, Colombia, the capital of the Colombian Pacific. And Cali it's not technically in the region of the Pacific. This state that Cali's in has a Pacific region, but Cali does not really fall in. So it's like Cali understands, it's really good marketing, right? Like Cali understands that the Pacific is the thing that's going to bring people, like the Pacific keeps me coming to Cali. But I spent all New Year's, I spent almost 3 weeks on the coast because it's more fun. The food is good, the people are nice, there's rivers, there's trees, it's very lovely.
Yeah,
but
it's not city in the same way.
No. And so Cali understands that the selling point is actually this place really close by, but because the place really close by hasn't been invested in, doesn't have a big city with the infrastructure that a big city needs to attract tourism, they're kind of, I don't want to say like stealing the swag of the Pacific, but they're kind of like latching onto it to make something. So I feel like that is the thing that they also want to latch onto is the thing that keeps me here, right? Because they have so many people from the Pacific. They have so many interesting, diverse cultures because the Pacific goes from north to south, so up all the way to Panama, essentially down to Ecuador. They have like a Pacific corridor. And there's a bunch of regions throughout, and there's always events. And what I love about Cali too is like it's very like black, and you don't have to think about it. You don't have to be asking people. Like I feel like there are other cities where kind of mixing between all the different groups that live in the country has been more encouraged, but it seems like the Pacific was isolated, so there's not a lot of people that have mixed over centuries. So like the way that they talk about blackness is not like they realized they were black yesterday or 2 days ago or 2 years ago. It's like people have a tradition of understanding their racial identity in a way that I can understand as somebody from the United States who grew up in the United States, and I can consume it and interact with it in a way that makes sense to me, which is cool. So I appreciate that because I think not everywhere in Latin America you'll find places like that where there are black populations that openly talk about blackness, openly talk about racism, openly talk about structural racism. Right. And here it's like really easy to find places, organizations, events, lectures that talk about all these different topics, whether they're the more negative side or the more exciting positive side or the cultural side. So I think that's the thing that I wish I could say all year, because they always have something exciting about black culture and stuff. Even And next week they're gonna be having capoeira situation.
Ooh,
Because some people
okay.
here really like capoeira, and they made contacts with people in Salvador, in Bahia, in Brazil.
Oh, dope.
And they're bringing a couple teachers to come do like a festival. And then in November, they had a Black Scenic Arts Festival. They had the Petronio. In February, hopefully one day you can come in February. I'm going to be gone, unfortunately, this year, but hopefully another year I can come back for in February time. They're having the Navidad Negra. I'm not sure if that's a marketing ploy or what, but I have never heard of it being called that before. But essentially, there's this town called Kinamayo that celebrates Christmas 40 days after Christmas because when they were enslaved, they were forced to work during Christmas, so they couldn't celebrate Christmas. So they always celebrate their Christmas for the last 150 years. I mean, I know slavery was abolished in 1851 here, but it seems like people understand that the tradition started in the late 1800s. And so they have this Christmas celebration that happens in February because they were able to convince the people they worked for to give them time off after the harvest season instead of during the harvest season. And they have this lovely but very kind of random Christmas celebration where all the saints are black, the baby Jesus is black, everybody's black. That's in the like images that they have in the Catholic tradition. And it's really lovely. I'll try to send you a New York Times article about
Please
it
do.
afterwards. They have really beautiful photos. Somebody went a couple years ago and they took amazing photos.
Wow.
But
And it's
that's the thing you
probably
can
around my
find down
birthday.
here. Probably. It's like usually the first or second week of February.
That's
Mhm.
me. That's so interesting. What you're
Mhm.
saying about the you know, the tourism piece in terms of, promoting, it is a very African and, city, right? But the way that it's being promoted, it makes me think about, so, before I talked to you, before this podcast, but like
Mhm.
offline, when you were sharing this about me, it was so interesting because what gets promoted so much is Cartagena, right? Like over the last, let's say, 3 to 5 years, we've seen a lot of influencers and content creators and a lot of travel content that's been focused on Cartagena, which I'm curious. I'm like, I want to go. But so I'm curious, the opportunities or kind of your thoughts about that, what that means. Not to say that there's only one African place you can go to. You know what I mean? Like that doesn't
Mhm.
make sense. But the differences between, what kind of opportunities are there for Cali versus, kind of what you've seen with the tourism boost of Cartagena.
That's a great question. I think that what's interesting about Cartagena is that it's been a domestic tourism site for a long time, as well as international. Like international seems like in the last 15 years it's come up, but domestically people always want to go to Cartagena because of the beaches and like in Cali we're inland, so there's rivers, maybe a lake, but no beach, no blue sand Caribbean beach. So people all across the country also want to go to Cartagena, to San Andres, even to Santa Marta, those places that are more in the Caribbean region. And I think the culture of it's not Las Vegas. I've never been to Las Vegas, but if I could understand the idea of Las Vegas, it feels like Cartagena lends itself more to this kind of like not city of sin, but like anything goes, fun, visiting a place. You can come for a weekend. You can gamble. You can drink. You can find
Wow.
women. You can explore the historical center. So it has a more kind of I don't know if this is more recent or if it's been that way for a long time, but it feels like it's more of like a city that people have come to learn to visit because of fun. Cali, on the other hand, has an I can't speak. Cali has an event-based tourism situation. So people come here for very specific times of the year because there's something exciting happening, but it doesn't bring in normal everyday tourism because first of all, my understanding is that I think the landscape of a place lends itself to over tourism or just tourism in general. So like having beaches makes it so like even if nobody even wanted to see any black people in Cartagena, they only wanted to go to the beach, they're gonna find black people there. And if they don't
Right.
find black people at the beach, at the hotel, they're gonna be Palenque, La Boquilla, no sé qué. There's all these places that you can go and see. Or, you know, now that they've become more conscious, they create Black History tours. There's a lot more Black-oriented things. But apparently in the past, it wasn't even like that. Like, they have very new murals and images of Black people everywhere, but it wasn't always like that. I think the sad thing is, like, once a city, you know, and city as a corporation, as a business, as not a Black-owned business, unfortunately. Once they realize they can make money off of Black things, then it's very like, oh yes, Cartagena is the blackest place in Colombia, and da 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 da. And then, you know, Palenque sells itself on its own because Palenque, I think for a long time they've been making connections with people on the outside, and people in the international setting share their experience in Palenque, and that's why a lot of people know about Palenque, even if they don't know that much about Cartagena. And I think that Cali, you know, Cartagena can almost separate itself from the idea of Colombia being dangerous. You know, a lot of people who are in their 50s and 40s are like, oh God, no, Colombia's. Even my own dad, he was like, you gonna keep going there? You're not scared? It's not dangerous? And I'm like, well, me, I'm not looking for danger, so I don't think it should find me. You know, but older people, they have this idea of Colombia that's all dangerous and da da da. But the beaches and the beauty of Cartagena, it allows you to be like, okay, well, it sounded dangerous some places, but Cartagena is so beautiful, it's so nice, you know. So people don't. I feel like people think about Cartagena, they don't feel scared, but then they think about other places in Colombia, and they might feel scared. Absolutely. And Cali used to have this group of mafioso people that were called the Cali Cartel, and I feel like they have this. Even in Colombia, they have a fame for being cartelish. Even though Medellin probably has a very strong sense of cartel life also, but it seems like Cali has been not associated with like a beauty of Colombia. It has historically been more Black also. And I won't say it has not always thought about itself as a Black city. Because even now, like I saw the Secretary of Tourism of Cali, they posted this video like trying to promote the Black tourism routes that they're starting, and people were commenting on the Instagram post, why are you guys trying to make it look like Cali's all Black? It just became Black people coming here a couple years ago. If you ask any of these Black people where they come from, they're gonna say that they're from somewhere else. You know, like people here there's a mixed feeling. It's like some people are okay with it, and some people are like, we are not a Black city. Like, why are you guys saying that? So it's all those things are recent, but I think that Cali is just not as pretty. It's not as invested in. Yeah. It seems like any drug money that could have entered Medellin, it seems like people have money laundered it in a way to look like investment in the city. So it's a really beautiful city. They have an amazing public transportation. It feels much more like a city that we would be familiar with in the States. I feel like Cartagena, I've never been to Miami to like go and enjoy, but I feel like somebody could compare Cartagena with a Miami or one of these fun places where you go and party, you drink, you in your bathing suit. Exactly, you know? And I think people invest in that. But if people don't see that in that image and sharing the image and selling the image and making partnerships with other people to sell those images, and if people don't see that there's something to sell from Cali, they're not going to sell. Right. The things that have naturally sold here have been salsa, the Feria de Cali that happens every December for 5-6 days. It's like from the 25th to the 30th or the 31st, and it's a huge salsa thing. And Cali is known as the salsa capital of the world. So like anybody who's a salsa lover knows about the Feria de Cali. Like people who are big on salsa. I thought I was a salsa girl. I was not as intense as I thought. Same, because I didn't. People, they know about the Feria de Cali, and they want to come and dance.
I didn't know that Cali was the capital, like the salsa capital. I would think Cuba. You know what I mean? Like
he was born in Cuba, but the culture, a living culture of salsa, is definitely here. Like after going to Havana. Like, there are young people who don't know how to dance salsa, or they don't like it. Here, there are babies who dance salsa. Like, it's very much a living culture. There's salsa choque here, which is like an urban salsa. There's urban salsa, there's romantic salsa, there's salsa choque. Like there's like a lot of iterations of the basic rhythm essentially that have been transformed, but they love salsa and it's intergenerational, especially in this part of the country. Like not just in Cali, but on the coast too. People are really interested in dancing salsa. They know all the songs. They, like Cuban
I'm
artists come here to
amazed.
play.
Okay,
You know,
that's what's up. That's amazing. So, on that note, then, can you share a little bit more about knowing, what you just shared about um, the way that tourism is like, they're kind of tinkering with it, right? And figuring out how to promote it. What are some of the offerings that you're like, how are you connecting with the tourism market? And, what is it that you think is interesting to people? And one of the conversations that we had that I thought was so interesting was, when you were sharing some of the music and your love of the music and some of the, festivities, I had the assumption that it was very much like rooted in, I was like, oh, is there like Orisha dancing and like these kinds of things? And you were saying, no, it's actually more Catholic, but with, but still African also as well. So I'm just curious if you can share a bit more about what you've been doing with the cultural workers and, how you envision, what are the kinds of trips that you're creating or experiences that you're creating for travelers.
totally. So I would say that the reason that I even entered the tourism field, I thought I would enter it at some point. I didn't know when, right? I took a trip to the coast to this town called Santa Barbara de Timbiquí in December 2022. I stayed there for 2 weeks. I lived in a hotel for a couple of days, and I stayed with this old man in a wooden house for a couple of days, bucket baths and everything, rainwater bucket baths, mind you. And I had a lovely time, and I think we talked about this spiritual thing. I think I didn't realize that. I think being Catholic is so different from what Christian, like with Protestant Christians, how they do things. Like Catholic Christians do things very differently, and I had no clue. I grew up near to Seventh-day Adventist, but I wasn't raised Christian per se. So, but I understand culturally some things more or less. But Catholics are very ceremonial. They celebrate things. It seems like for a longer time than what Protestant Christians do. So, like for example, I went to this town. They told me it was a music thing. I didn't even realize like it was a Catholic thing. It was like the music and the Catholicism are like this, basically. It's kind of like gospel. It's kind of like like how R&B and all these other like non-religious forms come out of the religious music. It's kind of like that. So like it seems like there's certain music genres that are born out of the religiosity, and then they can be transformed later. So I went to the coast to this town for 2 weeks, and 10 of those days were music all dedicated to baby Jesus, Mother Mary, and Joseph. For 10 days.
Whoa.
Different styles. Like there's 3 different rhythms basically. And one rhythm you have to play really close to Jesus' birth. One rhythm you play at another. It was like, it's very ceremonial. There's not that many rules, but there's a lot of rules. We went to mass every day, and like the mass wasn't super intense and serious. But essentially, I went for these processions that would happen. So they would do it at 3 a.m. in the morning, 4 a.m. We do a procession around the town. It's a small town, so you don't walk that far, but about an hour singing for an hour in the street. It's religious, but people have their rum out. They're drinking a little bit.
Of course, you got to.
And the young people, they're not super Catholic, but their songs, it's like part of their DNA is like being in that music. So even if they're not real Catholics or practicing Catholics, like it's important to them that those processions, those processes. So we wake up at 3 or 4 a.m., go around the town, go to the mass for 2 minutes. The padre goes like this. Does what he does. Everybody comes back down, keeps singing. Then they turn on the baffle, then they turn on the speaker, and then the salsa comes on. Everybody dances until 8 a.m. And then if you gotta go to work, you go to work. If you don't gotta go to work, you go take a nap. For 10 days. And then they had these balsadas, which are kind of like, it's like instead of a carnival float, it's like a boat float.
Mhm.
A balsa is kind of like a raft. So it's like a balsa is like it's like a caravan of rafts, but they built over canoes, and they're built to adore Jesus, baby Jesus. And they did that for the music happened from the 15th to the 24th, and then the 24th they have the balsas, and then the 25th. Catholics don't really do the 25th; they do the 24th. So they do all the
Uh-huh.
things for baby Jesus on the 24th, and I had no clue it was gonna be so religious, and I also went for Easter, and they mourn the death of Jesus as if he was like somebody that was their friend, like their cousin, They
Yes.
cry. I mean, and the songs are sad, and you can't play any music throughout the Semana Santa, except like the town I was in. Only one song could be played. This special marimba song that they made just for Semana Santa. And then they bring down this special marimba that's only played during the Semana Santa to adore Jesus and talk about his coming to pass and the whole process of Easter, essentially. So when I went to the town for the first time, I came back and I was like, somebody else got to see this. I can't be the only one that come in and experience this. There's somebody else got to see this, because I tried to even convince a friend, and she was so scared because people were like, no, it's dangerous there. You can't go. The red zone, da 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 da. I mean, and it's true. Like, the country labels it as a red zone. But during the religious holidays, it's safe because, I mean, it's hard to describe in a podcast, essentially. But there's different entities that are all doing work, essentially. It's kind of like in the U.S., like we have some things going on, too, that sometimes we are aware of, sometimes we're not aware of. But during the religious holidays, they're very special and sacred, and people can't come and mess it up. So no danger can come and happen during those festivities, because even if you're not intensely Catholic, they also kind of serve as a family reunion time. Like, people come home to their grandma, their mother, their aunt, or they want to go back to their hometown. Maybe their mom still lives in Cali, but the grandma's still there, or they have a cousin or an aunt. So the towns fill up with people who live all across the country that go out to work, because there's not a lot of work opportunities. They go out to study, and they come home to come and experience this thing that's really important to their kind of, way of being, of existing, or understanding themselves. So said, somebody else got to see this. I went alone the first time. The second time I went, I brought 3 friends. The next time I went, I brought 2 friends who paid to come. And that was like the first time that we got people to come and purchase the experience. And I worked with some musicians so that we could make a little package for them. And
amazing.
After doing those first 2 experiences, I said, Black people, we have such a rich culture. It's not just one, right? But like the way that we create after being enslaved, after being brought from God knows a different place that maybe we don't even know which places we might have come from, after being dragged, after surviving. I mean, it's really emotional when you think about it, but we are here because somebody in our ancestry survived all of that. Not just the journey, but like living in slavery. That was hard.
For hundreds of years, right? Exactly.
And then after slavery, they surviving in a place that doesn't like Black people, and that was using violence against Black people in ways that were not useful or not productive to continuing life. So it's like, we're here because thank God somebody survived all of that. And there's a music culture all around the world that survived because somebody decided to not give up making noise despite all this hardship. And, it's sad because they have under-researched the music history here. Like, it seems like Black music history is very under-researched, especially in this part of the world. Like, in this part of the country, the Atlantic region, it seems like there were more people that were open to studying it. Like, you have more information about bullerengue, about cumbia, about, champeta is more new, but lumbalú. Like, there's people who try to study certain things, and on the Pacific region, it seems like in the past, when they could have been studying it to really get some information from old people that existed in an older time, where it would be a lot closer to people actually arriving to this land, like They didn't connect enough information. So there's a lot of like, when you see these groups that play the music, you're like, damn, what was the first one like? Who decided to put these ones together? Who decided that this was the drum that they were going to use? Who decided the name? How did they build it? Like it's so miraculous. It's like we're all here as a product of like a miracle, but also because somebody wanted us to survive, and something wanted us to survive, and something wanted to inspire somebody somehow to make these kinds of music processes, and I feel like the music brings me there, but being there politicizes me. It's like it's like you get seduced by the candy and then they follow it up with the vegetable. Like the bitter vegetable come out at the end. And then they give you some meat or something, some stew, some kind of something sweet that's savory and salty, so you can still eat everything together. Like I feel like when I went to the coast for the first time, I remembered that I have the capacity to be somebody who believes in Pan-Africanism, that we should be Pan-Africanists, because even though whether I want to like black people or not, like the world is anti-black, and they're anti-black in an organized fashion. So it's up to us to be pro-black, to be Pan-African, to want to do good things for ourselves in an organized fashion, because other people are doing it in an organized fashion, but to our detriment. So, when I went there and I saw that, why am I bathing with rainwater in a place that's so filled with water? There's rivers. They have a river that's like so huge, beautiful fresh water at the top. At the bottom, it's dirty because of mining. It's gotten messed up with chemicals. Why is it that I'm bathing with rainwater when I had to buy water to wash my hair because I didn't want to finish the rainwater that we all had to use to bathe? So I'm like, if this place is filled with nature, filled with water, why do I have to wait for it to rain to bathe? It's like you need to ask yourself questions like, why is everything doubly expensive here, but it's hard to get work? It's because it's like the place I was at was like an island. Everything came in by boat or by plane. There's no road that connects that town to the rest of the country. So it's like, I feel like for me, the thing that I love about Cali is like it's not that the vegetables are bitter, but it's good for you, So it's like you always get seduced by the sweetness of the culture, whether it's the food or the music or the people, or you meet some nice boy or something, whatever it is. And then by force, it's like you can't avoid like understanding some more nuanced perspectives about the place in relation to the rest of the world, about the place in relation to you as another black person, about the place in relation to the rest of the Americas as a product of colonization. It's like it's hard not to think about it. And I think that's why I like doing tourism work, because I think it's a really fun way to do education. It's like I'm not stuck in a classroom, you're not stuck in a classroom, so now we can have fun in a way with the learning that's different from if you were in a different setting. You know what I mean?
That's right, experiential. And what you said about that, makes me think a lot about New Orleans, actually, and the idea of what is exciting and seduces people and brings people there. And I'll speak even honestly for myself. What drew me to the city is the cultural aspects, the black culture there, the black history there, the indigenous history, and like the various as well, the like immigrant communities, and in the way that it is this gumbo, but really how it's an African city. And and also with what you were saying about the Catholicism. So because of French and Spanish colonization there, a lot of people are Catholics, like a lot of black folks are Catholics. And so that's like a big difference to me. Similarly, we're from New York, most folks are going to be Baptist or something else, or something Protestant, pretty much. And so that difference, I think, or what you're saying about, the culture and the music, that art that's so vibrant, and the way that people celebrate, like you talk about the processions, and I think about the second lines, and they're different in, in terms of what they're honoring, but it's still, this joy in the street and this like celebration in the street with music and, live instruments and dancing and singing. But, at the end of the day, you have like New Orleans infrastructure is not good, like to say it very gently. What you were talking about, the rainwater, obviously it's not, to that extent in New Orleans, but like when we get heavy rain and you look at like, why are certain streets flooding? Why is there water pumps from like 1872 or whatever it is? You take kind of those things hand in hand together, and it's infuriating a lot of the time, because you're like, it doesn't have to be like this. And similarly, the point, where with New Orleans, where you have such a push for tourism, and like, what does that mean? Where if there's a water advisory in the city, the hotel don't have no water advisory. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like, so it's such an interesting, it's really beautiful. I learned so much from you today about, Colombia and Cali and the music and the history. And so I'm wondering if there's any, final thoughts that you have that you want to share with folks about, well, one, I want to make sure you tell people how they can get in touch with you, because that's very important. But, if they're thinking about visiting Colombia, do you have any like, pro tips or, hot takes that you want to share with people?
Yes. Great question. Also, I did not answer your question properly. I think there's a lot of research that has to be done on what the syncretism is in this region, because we debated about the Orisha thing, and I've debated about it with a lot of other people. If you're a researcher, if you're a teacher, if you're an academic, I think there's so much collaboration, working hand in hand, that could be done in this region with other Black academics to really try to get more to the bottom of what is being syncretized in these practices, because something is being mixed. I wish I could show you from my phone, but we were just there for the 7th of January, which was Three Kings Day.
Right.
And we were like, there's something going on in here that's not Three Kings, like, it's not biblical. There's something else going on in here, and it's hard to understand because people don't always have the language to tell you what maybe their great-great-great-great-grandparent could have told you about why or how it came to be or whatever. So there's a lot of research to be done. So if you're somebody who's an independent researcher, or you're an academic, or you're somebody who knows how to get grants to do research or to do documentaries or whatever, I'm sure there could be a lot of benefit on many sides to like just kind of uncovering more of what the specifics of the African story are in this region, because it's very obvious that it's African. It's hard to tell how, in which manner, which places. So I didn't answer that properly. I wanted to acknowledge that.
I'm so glad you shared that. I'm really glad, because we went in when we had our phone call. We were really, because that's something that I'm super interested in. And when you were like mentioned like Santa Barbara, and I'm like, okay, well, that's in like Lukumi, I believe, is Shango, right? Baba Shango. And so like I was like, oh, so it's like Shango Festival? You're like, nope. So, but to your point, like, these things are ancestral, what you're talking about with the Three Kings Day, even if there's not a name for it. And I would love if somebody is listening and reaches out and is like, yes, I want to study that, or I have some, resources to do that, because to me, I love those spiritual connections across the diaspora, and to understand how African spirituality, morphed or merged or whatever, the ways that it was held on to, but also integrated during the times where we could not practice it, right? And then there's still places that we still can't practice it, where it's still, demonized or criminalized. Exactly. So listeners, if y'all know anybody, or if it's you, hit us up.
Academics come to the front, independent researchers come to the front, because there's so much to learn from this region. And I think that's also what keeps me coming back. There's so much to learn. So much. I think U.S. Academy has undervalued this region of the world, and I'm sure maybe some of it has to do with maybe the violent situation that was happening like 20, 30 years ago
For
also,
sure.
but there's so much to learn, and you should come and look for yourself, because I think I'll weave this into the last question you just asked me. I think there's a lot of people that have a lot of really amazing things to share. There's a lot of places that just going there make you feel like you learn a lot. Um, and it just takes you having the initiative to come, because Cali, you won't come on your own. I feel like most people come here because of recommendations from somebody else,
Mm-hmm.
or because they're finding a friend. Like, oh, like say if Jazz wanted to come visit me, like it feels very much like this region, especially for foreigners, they don't come unless they have a connection or a friend, or somebody told them about some event or something that's happening, or you're a real salsa fanatic. That's like, but what we're trying to do right now is help visibilize things a little bit more, because I think people are trying to get to accustomed to the idea of this being a touristy city. People do not think about it as a city for tourists. It's an event-based tourism city, so people, even the culture workers themselves, have a hard time imagining what it would be like to have more consistent guests and travelers. And people are also nervous, like, if we get too many, what happens? We don't want to turn into Cartagena. We don't want to turn into, one of
Right.
those cities that's protesting or upset with the travelers. So there's a lot to figure out. I think we're kind of like pre-New Orleans, and I say we very loosely. Cali is very pre-New Orleans, so I feel like I learned a lot from being in New Orleans for the couple of months I was there too. It seems like the way that Black culture is exploited to push the tourism movement forward. It hasn't happened in the same degree here yet, but I can see that that's kind of where they want to go with it. And you can't always guarantee that Black people are going to financially benefit from the push after they receive the visitors, because if
That's
the
right.
city is in control of where you go and where you're recommended to, they will very easily recommend you to go to a white person owned restaurant that has hired two Black ladies to cook in their restaurant and has decided to make a fusion. It's like it's very easy
Yes.
for the water to slip away, and it's like, oh, well, I thought you guys were basing it off of us, and you left us out. So
Mm-hmm.
what we
Yes.
did in last summer was, I was in some meetings. Somebody else that I work with who does a great history tour was in some meetings. And after we talked, we were like, okay, something is happening, something is rolling, and we need to roll faster. Because unfortunately, us, we always are the last ones to find out what's happening around Black stuff. Like, they'll tell, some white person will come and tell you something that you should have known before they knew. So we decided to get the ball rolling a little bit, and we had a meeting of anybody that we knew that worked in tourism that was Black, whether they offered a Black cultural thing or whether they were just Black and they had a service. We organized a meeting. It was like 15, 20 of us, and then we made a WhatsApp group, and there's like maybe 60 people in the WhatsApp group. And we try to share resources, events. If the Secretary of Tourism is hosting something, there's one person in the group that has like a connection with somebody from the Secretary of Tourism, so that we try to give each other information, try to encourage each other, or do collaborations. We've had 2 or 3 collaborations come out last year from that. A new tour in Puerto Tejada came out from like 4 different people from the group kind of putting their heads together and helping to support the construction of a Black touristic route in Puerto Tejada, which is 40 minutes outside of Cali. So like, it's a space where we're trying to see if we can collaborate and visibilize and help people understand like how to better, not do business better, but just like, get on Instagram, take your
Right.
pictures, you know,
Excuse me.
okay, we tried your tour out. This is what something needs to change, or just try to help each other get along. From that group, we decided to create a directory. It's a very informal. It's not pretty, but it's functional. Okay, so we'll share it, but it's functional. It's not pretty. That's the warning.
That's
We
okay.
created this directory where you can understand Black businesses that are part of our network, that they want you to come visit them, or they want you to do business with them. Maybe they don't have a storefront, but they have products that they sell, or they sell artisanal alcohol called Viche, which is very popular here, or they create necklaces. There's a lot of like natural necklace like jewelry here. So like earrings made out of seeds and different pieces of wood and whatever. That's like a style here. So people who are creative, people who do food, people who do tours, people who teach classes. We have it in a directory that's like not tourism experiences, and then we have one that's for experiences. So if you need a translator, if you need a place to stay, we don't have that many because unfortunately there's not a lot of black people that own Airbnbs or anything like that. Unfortunately, not yet. Maybe hopefully in the future. We have one guy in the group who owns an Airbnb. Then we have people who do car services. We have people who do restaurants, people who have hair, if you need to get your hair braided. We have people who host cooking classes, people who do dance classes. So we try to collect people to say, okay, well, if the city, and when I say the city, I mean like white-owned institutions, whether it's black people working in there or not, white-owned institutions can go and promote black culture and tourism. Well, right. What can we do as independent black people who are international, right? Because there's a bunch of people who are from the States who bring people, and then there's a bunch of people who are Colombians who are black that host experiences. So like, what can we do to figure out how to work together and make sure that we also have a presence? So like, even if it's not as big and as strong and not as much marketing dollars and money or whatever to make videos and et cetera, like, what can we do to push that forward? So we have the directory. We're starting the Instagram. By Monday, that's when we decided we're supposed to be putting the first few posts up so people understand, like, what is Afro tourism. I think it's a concept that we don't talk about in English. In Brazil, they talk about it a lot because it seems like the terminology was born in Brazil, but it's the idea of black history or culture-based experiences. So it's not about the traveler being black, it's about the provider being black and the experience being black, and hopefully black owned. It seems like not everybody defines Afro-tourism as black owned experiences, unfortunately. Yep. But like, so it depends on who you talk to and things like that. But we're hoping that if tourism comes, that people can also find an independent black voice that talks about it, and not just the institutions that want to control everything, because unfortunately they don't think about supporting black businesses the way that we do. If we have a political decision to support each other's black businesses, it's very different from being like, oh, well, we just want to sell black stuff. The right. Public wants black stuff, let's give it to them. Versus us and being also, like,
what's the cut?
What's the cut?
In terms of who's getting paid,
for,
and how much.
And how much. Who's getting recommended. Like, I heard a couple things about, like, it's like black things, but the person who owns everything at the top is not black. That's right. Very easy to happen here. And I think because people here don't have the same kind of negative understanding of denying black people money. I feel like in the States, we're at a level now where it's like, if I say I want it black owned, I don't want to ask you if it's black owned. You should give me something that's black owned. Here, right. I think when they hear Afrocentric, like, for them it doesn't necessarily have to be black owned. Not yet. So once they understand our audience more, they'll realize, like, if it's not black people, I don't want to pay. Because if you sell me a black thing and then you give me something different, I'm not happy with that. As a client, right. As a customer. So they're learning about our profile as travelers, and even the black people here are learning about black America, black North American, including Canada, US, that black traveler profile is something new because they haven't really been experiencing tourism that much. So everybody's learning at the same time. If you guys want to support a business by coming and doing a class with somebody, I will share with Jazz the link for hopefully our Instagram will be up by then. So I'll just share the Instagram and then the link will be in the bio. We are supposed to be hosting a group. I mostly work with students, but we try to host at least something for adults once a year. So we're almost always going to do December on the coast for like adventure travelers, and it's like culture and adventure. And then in the city, it's more culture, more comfortable, hotel, hot water, everything like that. And we're going to try to host one during Memorial Day weekend this year. Yeah, because I'm gonna be around. So I'm like, might as well try to offer something so that people can come. Because I feel like I would love to not host. Because I feel like hosting is really fun, but it's hard to organize. And we've talked about this. It's very difficult to get the
Yes.
clients or whatever, whatever. But it's. I also told Jazz when we talked last time, like I feel like I'm doing my service as a human when I'm able to watch everybody take their class and learn X, Y, and Z, or they got the rhythm down from the drum that they just picked up an hour ago, or like it makes me feel like I'm doing my part in the world and what I'm
That's
been
right.
sent to do from the time that I'm supposed to be here for. So
Ashe.
we try to at least host at least once or twice a year, offer something for adults. Whether or not people buy is up to them, but at least to say that we did the offering. And if you guys, I'm not sure I'll be able to host for August, but if you are free during the Petronio Alvarez Festival, it should be happening mid-August. I will email Jazz the dates properly so it can be like in the show notes or something like that, but
Yep,
it usually
definitely.
happens in mid-August. It's never the first week, it's never the last. It's usually in the middle. And if I'm not hosting anything, there's a bunch of other people who are either Black American or they're Black Colombian American, like they were raised in the States but they live here, that offer things. So there's always something to do. There's always people to contact. We have a Facebook group, so if you're coming to visit, join the Facebook group. And once you're actually here, you can join the WhatsApp group. But I think it's a great place if you want culture. And if you
Yes.
like to speak Spanish, because they don't speak English here like they do in Cartagena.
I was wondering. I had the assumption. I was like, I don't. It doesn't seem like there's as much English
One time I was speaking
happening.
English, somebody asked me, they were like, what language are you speaking? And I was like, guess, because I wanted to see what they were. They said Chinese? Are you speaking Chinese?
No,
So there are you'll find
that's
one or two
amazing.
people that speak English, but the English is very rough. Like they didn't, seems like the infrastructure that they created, the language programming to teach English was not very strong. So you'll find a lot more young, like kids can speak better English than like people
For
who
sure.
might be in their 30s, 40s, 20s. But it's a
Right.
great place if you want to practice Spanish. My mom came in the summer and by force she was a lot better when she left when she went home.
Uh,
So.
See, I need to come and practice my Spanish,
Hmm.
among other things. Nyasha,
Exactly.
this was amazing. You are
Thank you so much.
so incredible, and the community building and how you've like integrated into community and really supporting the Afro tourism. And the cultural workers there is really phenomenal, super dope. I love it, and hope that we find ways to work together, that I can bring myself down at some point. And
Yes.
listen, I'm here to support what you're doing, and lifting this up. And so I hope my listeners will do the same as well. We're going to put all of the show notes. What's your IG for the people?
My IG is Whyze Nye. It's spelled in a funny way, so it's WHYZE.NY. And my business name is World to the Y, so WORLDTHE, the number two, WHYZE. But you'll find, if you find me, you'll find the business profile.
That's right.
And once we link our Afro Tourism Instagram to the Notion site, you'll find all the other Black providers that are either in Colombia or they live in the States and they bring people here. So if you're interested in coming and I can't help you, there's a couple of other service providers that you can work with. So feel free to come at any time of the year. Somebody's going to be here to be helpful.
I love it. I love it. Thank you again. This was fantastic. Got me excited and my wheels turning, and appreciating this history lesson and the time to commune. This has been Spirit in the Material World. This is your girl Jazz, and I will see you next time. And take care of yourselves and each other. Peace. All right. Let me